Let me ask you guys this question, and then we'll bring up this story. So first, we have a story. I'll just show this real quick. What we're going to get into: Trevor Noah ripping Joe Biden. It's from a few days ago, but I think it's fascinating to see that even people like Bill Maher and Trevor Noah, who would never give Donald Trump a single good day, not even after he took out the leader of ISIS, they called him an austere scholar. They would not give Trump the credit. You know, something seems to be changing. But right now we're dealing with a president in Joe Biden that I believe could be presiding over the collapse of U.S. dominance around the world, the end of U.S. imperialism, whatever you want to call it. And, you know, Ian, you mentioned just previously that you'd rather have an authoritarian psychopath who's making the country work than someone like Biden. But no, let's explore that. I mean, is it better to have someone who cracks the whip but fixes the problem, or someone who sits back as everything bursts into flames and falls apart?
Who also happens to be an authoritarian psychopath on top of that.
All right, well, then it's obvious.
My patience is running thin.
Either extremism in either of those directions is a bad thing, I would think, because you don't want someone that's so authoritarian psycho like Hitler that will just like mobilize and take and conquer. Of course. But you don't want someone that's so checked out like Biden that he can't say words properly or even give a State of the Union. He couldn't do it. He just gave a campaign speech. He couldn't give a State of the Union because you might not even know what the State of the Union is.
He was like slurring his words the whole time. It was actually
and he got all
very
that
sad.
The eye work done on his facelift. I mean,
did you see the bingo thing we did, Luke?
No.
We had like a bingo cards for the State of the Union, and one of them was like if Joe Biden uses a fake word, but he kept slurring so much and stuttering that would like.
That counts.
Did that count as a fake word or not? You know, saying like to traitors. We're like,
and meanwhile, when Trump did that, like he was tweeting and there was some obvious autocomplete, and they made fun of him for like 3 years after.
I know. Covfefe, right? Is that the one?
Yeah.
Covfefe.
Yeah, that was great.
But the problem is really, I mean, Biden can't speak. First of all, Trump had an odd manner of speaking. It wouldn't be hard to find someone that could just speak in normal English, and they managed to not do that. But if Biden totally keels over and we've got Kamala Harris, she can't speak either. I mean, just being able to speak English is like the lowest possible qualification.
Yeah, she's got the nervous. We talked about this before the show a little bit, like the nervousness where like if I let myself be who I really am, I'm going to say something wrong. I'm going to
and that's
say
the
something
thing
horrible.
Is we don't know who any of these people are. Biden is clearly not in charge of the country, but who is? And it's the same thing with Kamala. Who is behind the scenes?
Here's my favorite quote from Kamala. It is time for us to do what we have been doing, and that time is every day. Every day it is time for us to agree that there are things and tools that are available to us to slow this thing down.
It sounds like the Arthur theme song.
The title of this article from thecut.com is Come Again, Kamala?
Oh, right on.
This is can't talk either.
It's like that article where it's like Trump did something in a bathtub no one knows about, maybe,
elevator,
but we don't have any evidence.
No, an elevator.
Yeah, an elevator.
You ever see that article from the Huffington Post?
No.
Trump did something somewhere. What he did, we don't know. Who was there, we're not sure, but it's the Holy Grail. And I'm like, wait, what?
Oh, it's hysterical. Yeah. Well, but even this article, right? Trevor Noah ripping Donald Trump, ripping Joe Biden and saying Donald Trump would have been better is really significant because to these people on the left, Trump is literally Hitler. And even if he doesn't necessarily feel that way, his audience sure does. So for him to be willing to say, let me give points to the person who my side has literally been referring to as Hitler for years and years, because the current president is doing so poorly, doesn't really say good things for Joe Biden.
So let me quick just jump back to this Yahoo story, right? Trevor Noah rips Biden over Saudi UAE phone snub report. Would have never happened to Donald Trump. So this is like finally now, I'm surprised to hear this from Trevor Noah. I want to show you why this is so surprising. We have this tweet from the Huffington Post.
My favorite.
A tape might exist of Trump doing something in an elevator, though exactly where that somewhere is and what that something might be, no one in media can say. That's because no one in media seems to have seen the tape or is even confident it exists.
Oh my gosh.
This is Trevor.
As an investigative journalist, Lou, how do you feel about that headline?
I think we might see a next Pulitzer Prize winner.
Yeah, that's pretty good, yeah.
Yeah, how much you want to bet they did win one?
I'm sure.
Look at that image of Trump's face, too.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
God.
Maxwell Strachan.
Was that someone chasing him in Trump Tower? And they're like, hey, Trump! And then he wouldn't look at him, but they took the picture anyway?
Yeah.
So it's crazy that in their hysteria, they created an idea of something that didn't exist. They didn't define what that idea was. This article really does embody, we hate Trump for no reason. Now you have these liberal pundits coming out and being like, maybe Trump, wasn't so bad. So what really just, man, I'm so, I got a headache and everything. And I'm just like, all of these people that were screaming, we have to stop Donald Trump. He's an egomaniac. He's a fascist. And now we are dealing with quite possibly the worst administration we've ever seen in the history of this country. Maybe you can argue Woodrow Wilson was worse for a lot of reasons. Maybe Buchanan, pre-Civil War. But right now, the U.S., there's a lot of things happening in terms of soaring gas prices, inflation, manipulation, lies, escalating war. You know, I saw a leftist post on Facebook. They said, they were basically saying, why didn't we enact a no-fly zone before the war even started? When it was Ukrainian airspace and Ukraine had the right to agree to the United States and say we could do it, that would have forced Russia to break our, red line. And I thought it was an interesting point, because if Joe Biden knew all of this was happening, if Ukraine and everybody knew Russia was going to do this, then we could have gone in and secured it before the war even started, and it would have been incumbent upon Russia to be the ones to aggress against NATO, not the other way around. You look at Afghanistan and Bagram Air Force Base, all of it is basically just failures of intelligence, failures to act or do anything that would prevent war. Now, I suppose you can argue they must really, really want war. But when I kind of look at everything the Biden administration has done, I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe they're just, maybe incompetent is an understatement.
Yeah. Well, I mean, drawing a line in the sand there and stating a no-fly zone prior to Russia invading, regardless of whether you think that would be a good idea, is an idea which would require actual decision-making and leadership, and he's not capable of that.
He's the worst military commander I've ever seen in the United States.
The downside of his age is obviously his senility, but the upside is he should be more moored to the Democratic Party before it took this illiberal turn, which is very, very dangerous, where they're just kind of, they've turned against the First Amendment, they've turned against neutrality under the law. The younger generation has. But Bill Maher, what he's saying is no surprise, because he's a guy of a certain age. He remembers the Democratic Party of 20 years ago, which is a reasonable party. Biden knows full well he is a part of that party, and yet he doesn't have the spine to stand up against the young woke mob.
Yeah, when Bill Kristol, I don't know the guy personally, but he was a big part of orchestrating the Iraq War with the Bush administration. He's basically what people have told me is that all those neocons now are just in the Democratic Party. It's the war party, basically, and whatever you want to slap D or R on, it doesn't matter, because they're all administrative state.
Well, and it's interesting because people like the Cheneys, I mean, they are part of the war party, and now they're essentially Democrats, or at least Liz Cheney is.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah. Well, they see that that's a party full of people who are much more likely to comply with whatever you tell them.
Yeah. Well, Joe Biden's behavior really makes me think that he's certainly not the one pulling the strings, which generally makes me wonder what's actually going on. Because it's obviously not Kamala, because I've said this before on Twitter and I got roasted for it, but I think that she knows she's out of place. She knows she's out of her depth. Listening to her explanation of the invasion of Ukraine, she's like, Russia's a big country and Ukraine's a little country, and Russia went into Ukraine. That's bad. And I was like, are you serious?
But she was talking to a black radio station, which is it's one of the most racist things I've ever seen.
Yeah. I couldn't make up my mind. I was like, either she's being super racist or she just has no idea what she's talking about.
Yeah, but is it easier? I mean, is it simpler to just say no one has the strings? My view of things has been that Joe Biden is in charge, but everyone knows he's asleep. Even Trevor Noah in that segment was like, Biden's in bed by 4 p.m.
Yeah.
So it's hard for him to schedule phone calls with Saudi Arabia, who's 8 hours ahead. I mean, it's a good joke.
But so is it like the chief of staff, like Rob Klain or whatever? Is that the guy that's running the country? What's his name?
No, I think they're all sitting at the table, and Joe Biden's sitting there, and they all sit down, and they're like, okay, Joe, what's going on? And he's like, turn it on a shot of pressure. And then Kamala looks at Rob, and they just like, okay, so what's the agenda? And he's like, come on, man.
Yeah, the president.
And then they just get up and leave, and they're like, well, we have no agenda, we have no plans. The president fell asleep. Let's go bowling.
Like. Yeah.
Exactly. If the president gives no orders, they can do whatever they want, basically, until they're told to stop.
Or there's no nucleus.
Yeah.
It is, or at the very least, it's a damaged nucleus.
Yeah.
Joe Biden. A super chat, someone said, Kofifi, David, he says, Kofifi was my favorite word until I witnessed the magic of Trina on a shot at pressure.
That's pretty good.
That's true. I mean, think about, Trump had to accidentally tweet a word and everyone went nuts. Biden actually took the energy to say a much, much longer and more absurd word. It's
more than once, too.
Yeah, Batacalf care.
Batacalf care.
What is that? What is Batacalf care?
I don't know.
Man,
but yeah, I mean, he's not just an empty suit. He's worse than that.
Yeah.
He's really worse than that. And there is something very sad about the fact that this country has become so divided and hyper-partisan because of the encroaching far leftism that has hijacked the minds of the Democratic Party and many of the American people, especially as the right wing has started moving to the left. And it's gotten to the point where you don't even really get to consider whether someone's going to be a good leader when you elect them. You're just looking at their policies. And so the Democrats were not concerned with whether Joe Biden would be the right person to lead this country. They just said, well, he's not Trump, and they picked him on that basis.
There's a story right now. The White House called in a bunch of TikTokers.
Yeah.
And
calling in the big guns.
I feel bad for the TikTokers. There's like some 18-year-old woman who's got like 10 million followers.
Yeah.
And I watched her video and she was just like, gas is high because Vladimir Putin. And I'm like, she's literally just quoting Jen Psaki.
Yeah.
And I feel so bad for her because she's clearly well-intentioned. Like, I'm going to help my followers. I see these TikTokers and these are people who do like entertainment content. If they're willing to take time out of their day to actually address serious political issues, that's actually a really good thing. But when they're being manipulated by the White House to push lies, to prop up a guy who's gutting the system that they live under and making their lives worse, I'm like, that's just sickening.
Yeah, they're willingly taking part in propaganda.
Yeah.
No, but they don't know better, right? So look, we can say the path to hell is paved with good intentions, but I think the issue is you're on TikTok. You film videos of you doing makeup and hanging out with your dog, and you get 10 million followers or whatever, and then along comes who you think is the authority, who's got your back because you don't know better, and they're like, here's what's happening, and you go, I better tell my followers about this so I can help them. I can respect the good intentions. I don't fault an 18-year-old kid for being lied to. I blame the White House for lying to them and manipulating all of these young people.
What I think is weird, though, is I assume these are attempts to reach, quote, the youth, and these are young TikTokers, and they're just kind of echoing like what the man tells you. And I thought, growing up, I thought part of being a young person was being rebellious.
Yep.
And they're just kind of just regurgitating whatever the government tells them to. I wonder if young people still have that spirit of, rebellion.
Yeah, I mean, some of them. I mean, maybe the reality is most young people weren't rebellious, just some of them were. The people who went on to become leaders and challenging the system, innovating and disrupting, they were rebels. But I think most people probably aren't. They're probably just conformist.
I wasn't very rebellious. I had to learn to rebel. I had to kind of teach myself how when I learned how corrupted the system had become, like in 2007. I was like, wow, I really have to. I can't just live under this boot, even though I'm really wealthy.
Do you guys remember when Casey Neistat endorsed Hillary Clinton?
Oof.
So
No.
Yeah.
It's 2016. He's one of the biggest YouTubers. He got 5.5 million subs at the time. Now it's way bigger. And I think he's like semi-retired. I'm not sure. He doesn't really produce as much as he used to. And he made a video where it's like his channel is about travel and adventure. And then all of a sudden he's talking about Hillary Clinton. And he said it's because this election wasn't about politics. It was about one egomaniac and his quest for power or something like that. And that Hillary Clinton was the only person who could beat Trump. And I was like, Casey, who told you that? Because that's politics. And you were lied to. And it's provable. Hillary Clinton could not beat Trump. She lost to him. And it was so bad, they didn't try to bring her back for round 2. She was, in fact, the one person who could lose to Trump. Because I'm pretty sure they could have brought in almost anybody and probably beaten Trump. But Hillary was absolutely despised. So they go to these influencers, people like Casey, who don't know anything about politics. And I don't mean that in any way disrespectfully. He's not a political guy. They tell him, here's the thing. And he goes, okay, I'm going to go say that. And he was completely and utterly wrong. He's come out later saying it was a mistake and he shouldn't have done it. And he's right. Trump ended up being actually a really good president. Bad in some ways, for sure. Nobody's perfect.
Nobody's great overall.
But setting a timeline for getting out of Afghanistan, trying to get out of Syria, best numbers of our lives in terms of economics in 2019. A lot of good things under Trump. He was jammed up by the neocons and the neoliberal establishment. They had scandal after scandal holding him back, tying his hands, and he still did some good things. Far from perfect, but pretty good. Way better than Biden. I don't know what would have happened with Hillary, but those ideas were just wrong. Then we get the same lies in 2020 when these social media influencers came out. I'll give a special shout out to people like ContraPoints who said you have to vote for Joe Biden. Do you regret saying that? So now what we're getting from the propaganda machine is, aren't you glad Trump isn't president? Why? Even Bill Maher is saying it's a good question. Why didn't Putin invade Ukraine under Trump? So no, I think all of these people who came out and were like, guys, look, I'm a leftist and I don't like the establishment, but you have to vote for Joe Biden. It's like, there's no logic there at all. Because if you really wanted the system to collapse, Donald Trump was the bull in the china shop. If you really wanted something good, you want a repeat of Trump's economic plan that helped everybody with a good economy. There was literally no reason to vote for a warmongering, corrupt despot like Joe Biden, and they did. And now gas prices record highs, inflation four-decade highs every single month, wholesale consumer prices up 10%, escalation of war, our southern border in shambles. Everything's worse. More COVID deaths in 2021 than 2020, even with the vaccine. I mean, no student debt relief. Now the dude's totally turned his back on Black Lives Matter. All of these people who advocated for this sold out their followers, burned it to the ground, and now Joe Biden is just sitting back yelling, "Tune on a shot of pressure" as everything falls apart.
It's amazing how easily manipulated we all are, and I think that's the lesson from the last couple of years with coronavirus and masks. And all the left has been doing is calling someone racist, and then you have to do whatever they tell you to do, and then if not, you're. It's like it's not a clever scheme. It's like super obvious. Or you've got to do this because Trump is bad, and that's all they have going for them. It's not clever at all. It's not subtle, but people keep falling for it.
So what would you say the solutions are, or what direction do you believe we have to head in as a country to fix this?
I mean, I think the Democratic Party really has to reject the illiberal left. I mean, these ideas of treating people differently based on race, rejecting objectivity in some ways, like these are insane ideas. With some of the school stuff where they're talking about, getting into they got rid of some of the math magnet school, the top math school in the country, because there weren't enough blacks getting in. So they say tests are not real. Like, you can't indulge these ideas. That's a conspiracy theorist. That's a conspiracy theory. They call people on the right conspiracy theorists all the time. So I think the only people that can save this party, this country, Joe Biden was well situated to do it because he's a Democrat that is not grounded in the far left fringe. And unfortunately, we've learned that he's not the guy to do it.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.